Welcome back to News Maker Live. Thank you very much for staying tuned. We're speaking here with the director of the National Emergency Management Organization, Don French. Now, something that has been in the news for some time now, mass crowd events, and we're into the carnival season. We have many major parties being organized, culminating in the two-day street parade. You have been on record as saying that people do not take the necessary precautions and they do not go through the required protocol to put on these events. What is your main concern about those mass crowd events and the planning for those events?
Well, some people do put the precautions in place, and you know the persons who are concerned, because when they come into the office and you start to have the discussions, the instinctive reaction is, boy, you should have had that a long time ago. And then you have the other end of the spectrum where everybody's quarreling, why you have to do that, why I must do this and why I must do that, and since when I must do this and since when I must do that. But it's the laws of the country. What is different this time around is that the agencies have gotten together to insist and to effect the laws of the land. So it was an eye-opening experience for me, Clinton, going through the process with the agencies. So I want to have something on the beach. I have to ask NCA permission to be on the beach. If I'm putting up a shack, I have to ask Development Control Authority to put up the shack. If I'm running electricity, I must ask the Electrical Division of Infrastructure to come and inspect the connections to make sure that the electrician I have hired knows what he is doing. I must tell Solid Waste Management Authority how I'm going to clean up after the fete. I must pay ECHO the royalties. I must, if I care anything about the people coming to the beach, at least have the Lifesavers Association on board. And that's just 6 agencies off the bat that I can think of.
Well, let's take a call and let's talk a bit more about that. Good evening. Please go ahead, caller.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening.
I tuned in very late. We are told regularly to listen to our radio and our television during a storm. But some of the radio stations yesterday were off. What do we do then? Thank you.
Thank you. Good question.
That was such a case of divine intervention. It was a lightning strike. That's why they went down. And but it's a very good question, because one of the things we now have to discuss is, where was your generator? Did it kick in? Or if it did kick in, because it was a lightning strike on an antenna, would a generator have made no sense anyway, because it was the antenna that was affected. So, but they did come back on as soon as they could, all of them apologizing. But
then what do you do in that situation if there was very necessary immediate information that needed to reach the public, and this had happened? What measures does NEMO have to ensure that the messages go out to the public and reach them in a timely manner?
This is why you layer your technology. One of the things that we would have had to have done is to use our radio, Hammer radio, HF and VHF, to talk to the district committee so that they could have gone around physically to give the information. Thankfully, we're in 2013, so you could have also used Facebook and WhatsApp and BlackBerry Messenger, but it's still traditional to use the radios and television. But when that kind of thing happens, you have to go to the backup plans to get that information out.
Well, I know that sometimes messages are sent via SMS, and sometimes they're not reliable because people use these, and there have been so many
false BBs,
right?
Yeah, which is why also a number of the agencies have Facebook pages, and a number of people do subscribe. So WASCO has, so NEMO has, the Met Office has, and in fact the Met Office website actually went down, but their Facebook page was still operational. So a lot of information goes out that way as well.
I mean, information is necessary. Yeah, the gentleman said that you have asked people to listen to the radio. Is there? I'm sure there is. What protocol is in place, as far as the dissemination of information from NEMO to the public? We know that NEMO is a government agency. The NTN, GIS, they're also government agencies, but they are not radio and television station. Well, NTN is, but as far as radio, they do not have a radio arm, which is more immediate. It's easier to send out a radio message than it is to put a television message together. So how do you go about doing that? Do you pick and choose which radio stations, which television stations that you work with?
No, we work with all of them. They all subscribe to the distribution list that we have. We're all in contact with them out of crisis and during crisis, which is interesting because at times like this, I have an open door policy with the media. They can just walk into the office anytime, and if I'm not in a meeting, I will give them the interview that they're seeking. I don't have that luxury in crisis, and so I usually have a media person in the EOC with me to handle local, regional, and international. You'd be surprised the people that get my telephone numbers from Anderson Cooper going down. Where they get the number from, I don't know. But suddenly you have a CNN correspondent trying to do an interview with me, and I'm trying to coordinate a search and rescue, and I don't have time for the press in the immediate response. So a media liaison comes in. In the past, it has been Mr. Kirby Allen, who has really been a lifesaver for us sometimes in dealing with the media during a crisis, because I just cannot do both at the same time. Now, we have not had a disaster of the scale that would require a media center. But there is provision in the disaster preparedness plan for St. Lucia for a media center. And what this essentially is that because of the nature of the disaster, the media will then descend upon you. And so you need to be able to coordinate that as well. And so you have a place set up for them where they have the internet access, and they can make their phone calls and make copies and print and do all sorts of things. But it's also the center where the decision makers and the technical people will come and do a daily briefing. So the press will be all over the place trying to get their story and do interviews, but they know, say, 2 o'clock every afternoon, the minister responsible for disaster preparedness and the disaster coordinator, maybe the commissioner of police, depending on what is going to be discussed that day, will come to the media center to do a briefing of the press and take questions, indicate what has happened and what it is going forward. We have not had a disaster of a scale that has required that, but there is provision for that if it's needed, and that would be coordinated by the GIS.
And all the emergency personnel, the head of the agencies, know that this is the protocol, and they would be available to make those. Okay.
You've had glimpses of it through the years. For example, when we were dealing with the pandemic influenza that was raging around the globe, you had glimpses of it where the medical personnel would come into the GIS studios and do press conferences. So you have had shadows of it, but thankfully you've not had to do crank up the full mechanism.
Well, I mean, you know, some of the media, well, if not all of them, are so territorial, and you know, the whole thing is about getting the story first, whether in crisis or out of crisis. I mean, how do you get media personnel to buy into that way of doing things when the whole aim is to get the story out first, get the information first, and put it out there so that you keep the eyes and ears glued to your medium?
I have found working with the media, if I can give a practical example to illustrate the relationship. When you do a damage assessment report, it goes to the Prime Minister first, and then it is distributed to the donors. And I've had media call me because they want to know what the damage is, what the cost is. And I will say to the media person, I have not given to the Prime Minister yet, and you can appreciate that the Prime Minister should get that information from me and not from you. So give me a chance, let me give it to him, make sure he has it, talk to him, and then we can do the interview. And the media person says, okay, I can live with that. They go and they come back. I have found that if I am frank and truthful and upfront, and I'm not hiding and trying to play any kind of agenda, the media gives me that same respect back.
Now, before the caller called in, we were talking about, you know, the masquerade events, and that is something I want to spend a little bit of time on, because recently we had a situation at Summons Park during a masquerade event that was the Wet Fete. There were reports of electrocution. At least 5 people were treated at hospital.
They weren't electrocuted, they were shocked.
Well, they were shocked, right. They were not electrocuted, they were shocked, that's it. You mentioned that included in the masquerade events, is the involvement of the fire service and the Ministry of Infrastructure to ensure that the electrical aspect of it, the lighting, the running of lines for power, are done properly. Are you aware that this was done?
As far as I'm aware, the inspection did take place, and I'm waiting for the report, because a number of agencies, because of their various mandates, have to go and do an investigation. And when they have finished and they've done up their reports, then the stakeholders committee will get together and discuss the findings of the report. If the report shows that there's any criminal negligence, then the relevant legislation that governs what has happened will kick in, and the agency responsible will deal with it. So to be practical, when we have an oil spill, for example, and when we get the report, we realize that the person has been negligent in the spill in a river, and there's been a fish kill. The fisheries legislation will kick in, and the Department of Fisheries will then fine the person under that. So for a masquerade event, to take it away from wet fit, for a masquerade event, if there is a medical emergency that was your fault, then the legislation covering the medical sector will kick in, and the chief medical officer will decide if she's going to fine you and prosecute you. If it's an electrical that has happened and somebody has been shocked or electrocuted, then the legislation covering that under the mandate of the electrical department of the Ministry of Infrastructure will kick in, and they will then deal with you as per the law. So there's laws for everything, which is why the agencies are now trying to enforce it. But I don't want people to see it that way. I want people to see it as their right to have these agencies on board. I am having an event. I want you, I'm a taxpaying citizen, come and make sure that you're going to give me backup for my show. This is how I want people to see it.
But I mean, obviously it would come at a cost.
Some of it comes at a cost, but not all. There's some, I think the police and the medical, but you have like Red Cross. Red Cross doesn't charge you, but what Red Cross might say to you is that if my people are going to be there for the whole day with you, the least you can do is feed them or help us top up the first aid kit that we're going to be using. That's not unfair.
But I guess some promoters, some organizers feel that it's too much.
But you're in a money-making business, so budget for it.
Yes, yeah, and that is the sadness of it, that so many people are there. There is a possibility that they might be at risk, and there are cuts that are made in places where you would need those individuals
for
if
example,
something were
Clinton,
to go wrong.
I don't know how many event organizers know that there's such a thing as no-show insurance. So you're organizing a show and you hire me to be in the show, and I don't show up. And everybody vexed, they want their money back. If you had taken insurance, the insurance would kick in and you give everybody money back.
That is interesting. I don't know how many of them know that, and I don't know how many of them want to know that either. Because to get insurance,
now the big shows, and the serious shows also take public liability insurance.
Right.
So for jazz, there's public liability insurance because you have people from all over the place. You don't know what's going to happen. You need to have what's called your risk transfer. You need to transfer the risk of what you're doing to someone else, and the mechanism for that is insurance. So having spoke about insurance earlier and in the show, at our level, there's also at that massive level where you're going to have this big show, and it's recommended that you talk to a broker about getting public liability insurance.
Because I remember the last major event that the MASL put on, the Media Association of St. Lucia, that is that T20 match with the government. There was public liability insurance to ensure that if anything went wrong, we would not be held liable, and then people would be compensated. So are more people? We have a call on the line. We'll go to that call and I'll ask you the question. Good evening. Please go ahead, caller.
Hi. Good evening, Don. Good evening.
Good evening.
Mr. Reynolds.
Good evening.
Don, I know for a fact that sometimes your office, rightfully so, would actually not sanction or not authorize some activities. Yet you have some offices giving it the go-ahead, the green light to move on. Where do you stand on the way to the future? How do we deal with this in the future, where when NEMO says no, this building is not equipped, no fire escapes, security is not in order, the escape route is not good, and you say no, and the show goes.
Yes, this is the line cut. Go ahead.
We missed that last part, caller. Can you just repeat that last part because we missed?
Oh, he's got.
Oh, sorry.
We got the gist of it.
Yeah.
Well, the way it's structured is that their agency is responsible. So he mentioned the fire escape, and that falls to the fire chief. So it's for him to sign off on. The evacuation plan is also for the fire chief to sign off on. Permission, I need to say this because a lot of people hear me talk about masquerade events and think I give permission. Permission for a masquerade event is given by the Commissioner of Police. And what the stakeholders have agreed is that police will not give you permission for a show unless you can indicate to them that you have the other stakeholders on board. So that you're going to have a medical backup, you're going to have backup from ambulance, you're going to have lifesavers, and then when you can show that, the paperwork, then they will give you the permission. So permission does not come from my office.
Okay, we have another call. Good evening, caller. Please go ahead. Oh, we have a little difficulty. Now, is there one agency that can override the other in terms of, you know, those events?
Yes, if under certain circumstances. For example, the Labor Commissioner, if you are coming into this country to perform, everybody said, but there's freedom of movement. There's no freedom from paperwork. If you're coming into this country under the CSME, you must have some sort of certificate from your country, from your Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So if you're coming in from, so Marshall is coming in from Trinidad, he must have his paperwork from Trinidad Foreign Affairs for him to be able to function in this country. If you're coming from out of that mechanism, you must have a work permit, and there's a specific type of work permit that is issued for this sector. And if you don't have it, the Labor Commissioner can come and pick up your entertainer, and there goes your show. Because you're operating in the country illegally.
Now, who has the overarching authority? Is it NEMO? Is it the police?
For
I mean, for those masquerade events, because
you said that
you said that the fire chief
has certain responsibilities.
In terms of the escapes.
You have what's called a joint command. So for the bigger shows, jazz, the cricket matches, there's what's called the VOC, the Venue Operating Center, and in there you will have police, fire, medical, and NEMO as a minimum, because it's a joint command, and something is happening, the 4 commanders will agree on a line of action. So if it's a medical emergency that is happening during the event, everybody will discuss it, but the person that is going to issue the instruction will be the medical person. If it's a security issue, everybody discuss, and then the police officer will issue the instruction. So that's the nature of joint command.
And where does NEMO factor in there?
NEMO is in the joint command because we're there to facilitate what the other agencies want, particularly if it starts to escalate. It may escalate to the point that you need regional intervention, and that would happen through CDIMA, or if it's a security issue, through RSS. So we're there to, just as we do for a storm, we're there to facilitate and to get the resources that the other agencies may need to leave them free to do the response.
So you're mainly there for backup?
For backup and coordination.
Okay. Yeah, because from my understanding, you know, I mean, for the masquerade events, and I want to stay on that, you know, NEMO is your first point of call. You know, that you go to NEMO, you get...
There are 2 levels of response in a masquerade event, which is another thing that we try to sensitize, entertain planners on. There are the minor incidents that are your responsibility because it is your show. But
when you say the minor
well,
incident,
someone trip and break a bone, got too drunk and disorderly, and so you have to, you know, bundle them up. The little things, quote unquote little things. But if so something falls on someone and you have to take care of it, the stage collapse and a few thousand people are affected, you have to work with the government agencies. The liability will remain yours, but the government mechanism will kick in to assist and deal with the persons who are affected, because it is an emergency of significance, and so the national response mechanism will kick in. The first responders will react, so the Red Cross will be on the scene doing triage, the fire service will be running the ambulances, the doctors will be triaging who needs to go to hospital for surgery, and some people may have to go to other islands for assistance. The government will assist in that, but the liability will be yours because it is your show.
So what powers?
There are different powers that fall to different people. So
no, I mean in terms of the powers that NEMO has, can you say, okay, well,
we are coordinating. I understand we are coordinating agencies. It's not about powers. It's about coordination.
Right.
So, if the chief medical officer decides she wants to do a medivac, she has the authority to order the medical evacuation, but she may not have time to coordinate and get the helicopter, so she'll turn to us and say, I need to get people out. And so I'll say where and when, she'll tell me where and when, and through the transportation committee we will get the helicopter and move out.
But NEMO cannot say, okay, well, you have not gone through the necessary procedures. For example, if you're planning a show. No, we cannot stop a show. And therefore, you know, we stop it. The police have that
falls
power,
to the
not
police.
NEMO.
But what we can control is our volunteers. And there are some venues that I have told my volunteers, you can go as a citizen of the state, but you're not going inside there under a NEMO banner. NEMO is not giving this show back up. And there are some people watching this show who will testify that I have told them, if you have a disaster, we will come in afterwards. But I am not putting my volunteers in danger at your event. Go forth and have your show because you have permission from the Commissioner of Police, but NEMO not going to be on that side.
So what kind of shows are you talking about?
I'm not going to say
I'm not going to tell you to tell me which show specifically, but what are the concerns that you would have that cause you to take that decision?
The evacuation plan sometimes is not available. Now you want us to be on a site and something happens and there's a stampede. The volunteers are there to assist you. The escape route the gate might still be locked. I mean, my volunteers have had many an argument with persons about unlocking gates. You don't know where the assembly points are. You don't know where the evacuation routes are because the person that is having the event themselves don't know and so cannot tell you. Now, how can I authorize a volunteer to go into that kind of condition? That's dangerous. But you have permission to have your event. I can't override that, so go forth and have your event. But NEMO not coming to back up that show. We'll come afterwards, but I'm not going to put my volunteers in danger and have them at that event.
Interesting. We'll take our final break on Newsmaker Live. When we come back, we'll wrap up our discussion with Dawn French, the director of NEMO. Stay with us.